Anderson, I think what we're realizing now is what happens when you have the power of the presidency, the bully pulpit of the presidency, combined with 80 million Twitter followers, and a president who really will violate any norm. We'll just tweet conspiracy theories, lies, attacks on people, and just say I'm passing them on. I think what we really saw at the Capitol is how deep that rot went. How many people in the country have been marinated in these conspiracy theories, QAnon craziness, and it is frightening. And so, I've been thinking a lot lately, Anderson, about what I learned trying to combat Islamic, radicalism after 9/11. And I think there's two things to really keep in mind here. The first is ideas don't just win; they require power to win. Bin Laden was powerful. When the Soviet Union collapsed, so did communism. When the Nazi Germany collapsed, so did Nazism. America stood astride the world, our ideas of free markets and free people for the 50 years after World War II, because we were strong. So the fact that Trump is leaving the presidency in disgrace, and the fact that his party may fracture, that is really important, because those bad ideas will not be harnessed to the power they had. But the second thing, and this goes to really what Jay Johnson was dealing at, that we learned from the Middle East, is that these ideas, once they are embedded, they really require a war of ideas within. So what I called first for so many years was the war of ideas within Islam. It was when Muslim leaders and Muslim clerics actually took on these ideas that they began to shrink. And what we're going to need here is Republicans, conservatives, to take on these ideas. There's got to be a war of ideas within conservatism to actually root this out. One of the things I learned from the Israelis about after 9/11, I was in Israel on 9/11, and I asked them, what did you learn about suicide bombing? And they said the most important thing we learned is that it takes a village. That is, if the wider community says suicide bombing is martyrdom, then there'll be more suicide bombing. If the wider says it's murder, then there'll be less. And what we need right now, more than anything, is conservatives to call this out for what it is. That this is craziness, this is madness, it has nothing to do with conservatism. There has to be a war of ideas within the conservative movement.
And yet, I mean, again, you've written about this a lot, particularly recently. There are QAnon folks in the halls of Congress now. There are all these, House members who still, even after the insurrection, while there was still rubble around inside the halls of the Capitol, were voting to overturn the will of the vast majority of Americans.
Yeah, it's terrifying, but and there are many things that are necessary to root it out, but I think the most important thing is that party fracture, because the reason these ideas scaled was actually the party was split inside the Republican Party. We've seen that. But because they had the White House and the Senate, they were able to cement over a lot of those splits with goodies. They will not have the Senate. They will not have the White House. You are about to see, I believe, conflict within that party. I mean, it will be scorpions in a bottle. And that's actually healthy, because that fight has to happen. Because when that happens, if they are out of power for a while, there's nothing that cures crazy ideas in Washington more than being out of power.
That makes sense. It's interesting though. I mean, like, you see somebody like Lindsey Graham, who, the night after the insurrection, got up and said, I'm out. This is, I hate that it's ended this way. We had a hell of a ride. The president was a president of consequence, which that doesn't really mean anything. I mean, but
a lot of bad consequences.
Right, exactly. But, and then he gets, I don't know if him being yelled at in the airport, which is always unpleasant to have that happen, had a big effect. But now he's back on Fox talking to the president and riding on helicopters with the president down at the border. I mean, it's not exactly, long lists of profiles of courage.
Yeah, I mean, there's Lindsey Graham has danced at so many weddings. I simply have no clue who signs on anymore. I mean, it's just, but he's really typical of the party that has been willing to abase itself to be close to power. But what happens when they have no power to be close to? And that's why, for some of these young men, I watched the video you had earlier up there. It so reminded me of people I met in the Middle East from some of these extremist groups. All these young men who have never held power, a job, or a girl's hand. Not all of them, but that's what you had, young men who sort of had fallen behind, couldn't get married as a result, couldn't even get a house or an apartment. And that's the third leg of this stool, which I'm looking forward to. And that's what Joe Biden does. What he does to lift up the working class, the dignity of people, that's also part of this story. And it's going to take a weekend party, a war of ideas within conservative movement, and a success by Biden in lifting the economy and just bringing normal back to the country. Anderson, we're like abused children. We've had this guy, we've never had this before, a president with the bully pulpit of the presidency and 80 million Twitter followers, injecting these terrible ideas into the mainlining them into the minds of these people. What's so scary about those people in the Capitol is they actually believed it. Mm-hmm. That's really scary. And so we didn't get into this in a quick way. We're not going to get out of it in a quick way. But it does take a successful Biden administration, and it's going to take a real war of ideas within the conservative movement. And that's what you, I, the rest of us, principled Republicans have to hold their feet to the fire for. Lindsey Graham is never going to deliver for you. He's simply sold out to too many people. But there are people there, the Liz Cheneys. We have to defend them, we have to protect them, we have to enable them, because they are taking a risk. They're the Muslims, the Democrats who took a risk and took on bin Laden and his ideas. We've got the same.
Do you have any sense of what President Trump's afterlife will be? I mean, how long he actually sticks it out in Mar-a-Lago before trying to slink back to New York? I mean, what do you think? What does he become?
He's right now facing humiliation, liquidation, and incarceration. And I think that's one of the reasons we haven't heard much from him. I mean, he must be staring at a really scary future. And, one of the things we just have to tell everybody, okay, the Fox people, the Facebook people, that if you are trucking and if you are amplifying and you are purveying these conspiracy theories, okay, you have got to stop. You are really, really hurting this country. Rupert Murdoch, Lachlan Murdoch, Sheryl Sandberg, Mark Zuckerberg, what the hell are you people doing? What do we have to do to get you to realize that these ideas have been mainlined into people now so far, so deep that we've had to check the National Guard to see who has been infected or not? And so every one of us, we all have to be on our A game. By the way, that includes the liberal press, you, I, all our institutions. We've been mobilized. But we got to calm down too. We got to get back to separating news from opinion. Yeah, totally. We got to get back to people wanting to read our papers, watch our cable shows, because they trust it for the news. And if we are, because we were so mobilized against Trump, and if everyone's just been on total edge, we've got to all calm down, but we also got to understand the stakes. If you are purveying conspiracy theories, you are an enemy of the nation. And if I see you on the street, if I see you at a conference, I am going to call you out. And business has to do it, politicians have to do it, media has to do it.
Tom Friedman, I appreciate it. Thanks. As writers invaded